What you're about to experience is one man's quest to see beyond the tumultuous period we're in and to envision what lies just beyond our grasp, yet well within our reach. Welcome to Larry Rifkin's America Trends, where the future has arrived, and it's just in time.
Larry Rifkin and John Krofzik back with you on America Trends. And I've got to tell you, John, I'm really excited about bringing you this next presenter because she's from our own community. And John, we are really fortunate. We have some incredible women in our community who have started these nonprofit organizations based upon their own personal stories. And it starts with tragedy, and then they take it and they make it into a cause that helps many others. And you know the woman that I'm talking about.
Yeah, she's such a nice person. It's hard to believe what she went through.
Well, in one case, and the woman we're going to introduce you to is Dr. Nancy Cappello. But we have another woman in our community, Donna Palumba, who was raped. And as a result of her experience with law enforcement and the like, she started a group called Jane Doe No More. Yep. And she's gotten a lot of attention, the New York Times Magazine recently, Dateline. But Nancy Cappello, when you and I have met her many times.
Oh, yeah.
And she has many fundraisers in our community. But her impact is throughout the United States. I mean, it really is. And reading some of the articles that go back several years saying that if it wasn't for Nancy Cappello, a lot of women who have dense breast tissue wouldn't even know that there are needs that they have to get additional testing, and their doctors may not share that information with them unless they're aware of it.
Well, plus the insurance companies wouldn't pay for it in the past. So, I mean, there was a lot of problems with this before she, it was identified.
Well, Nancy has a story, and she'll tell us how this all affected her. And it was a really serious issue for her. And she even suggests that she's not totally out of the woods yet. We hope she is, because she has done so much for so many in changing legislation about dense breast tissue. I was shocked, John, to learn that 40% of women have dense breast tissue. And it's really a topic that you have to hear her. She's so passionate, so articulate about this issue. And she reminds us that breast density predicts the accuracy of a mammogram at any age. So we learn so much. And if you're not a woman, but you have a woman who's important to you in your life, and that, I think, speaks to all the men who are listening to our podcast. And if you are a woman of just about any age, I mean, you really need to hear this because, John, we've had a lot of controversy about mammograms and how often should you have them and what do they really detect. And here we're going beyond the mammogram today. And she started this organization called Are You Dense? Exposing the Best Kept Secret. And Nancy really shares with us her own story and really reaches out to any woman in the audience or man who cares about a woman and says, there are things you need to be aware of. And I hope that this podcast, just as she has reached out to people all across the country, will bring so many more people around the country and around the world to an understanding of dense breast tissue. I really do.
Oh, me too. This is an important issue, and it's a life-saving issue.
Absolutely. But you've got to find it quickly, and you've got to go to your doctor and say, I know something about this, and I want to make certain that I have all of the testing that's necessary to ensure that you just haven't missed a cancer that may be growing. That's all today with Dr. Nancy Cappello. Are You Dense? On America Trends. Dr. Nancy Cappello is with us from an organization that she founded and has nurtured into a national movement and a cause regarding the issue of cancer detection for women who have what is called dense breast tissue. Now, we all know how important breast health is for the women we love, but imagine thinking that a mammogram has given you a negative result for breast cancer and finding just the opposite because the tools necessary to discover the disease were not used, even though they clearly exist. Well, enter Dr. Cappello, whom I should add has a doctorate in education. By the time this podcast has concluded, I'm sure you'll think she's a medical doctor. She knows so much about this topic. And Nancy, by way of introduction, please share your story with our America Trends audience.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks, Larry, for having me on America Trends. This is no overnight success. I've been trending for 14 years since my diagnosis. So, my story, sadly, is a common story. I was a regular old person, ate healthy, exercised daily, no risk factors that I knew of, but I started having mammograms between the age of 35 and 40. I had a baseline. The only reason was because my mom did and my aunts did, and I wanted to follow their practice. In the unlikely event that I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I believed that it would be found early if you went for your faithful annual mammogram screening.
And most women believe that.
Absolutely. And so it was 2003. I just had my 11th quote-unquote normal mammogram. I was premenopausal. I had just turned 51. And I'm pointing out the premenopausal piece because when you look at breast cancer, often if a woman is premenopausal, her cancer may be more aggressive than postmenopausal, even though the median age of getting breast cancer is about 62 years old. It's really an older women's disease in some respect, and that's why when women get it early, there's a lot of caution and worry about breast cancer. And so my 11th report, dear Ms. Cappello, we are pleased to inform you the results of your mammogram are normal. Being a faithful patient, never missed my appointments. I was going to schedule my colonoscopy, first one, after I had had my annual gynecological exam. So about a month later, I was with my gynecologist having my yearly exam, again, never missed it. And as she was doing a clinical breast exam, she said to me, Nancy, I feel this thickening. Now, not a lump, but a thickening in your right breast. I know you just had a mammogram, but I am going to send you for an ultrasound. Now, again, not my field. I mean, I knew kind of, what an ultrasound kind of did. I never was called back before ever in the years that I was getting mammograms. And so I made the appointment, went for my mammogram. 3 days later, it was normal. Because it was palpable, the standard of practice then and now is if there's a palpable something, which she said was a ridge or a thickening, the next thing is after you do your diagnostic mammogram, which only concentrate on the right breast area, they do the ultrasound. And so I had my mammogram and went across the hall, had an ultrasound as the technologist was examining my right breast in the upper quadrant. She said, "Excuse me." And I thought, I hope she has to go to the bathroom because this doesn't seem like she's going to be, where's she going? And before you know it, two other males in lab coats walked in and they were looking at the screen, looking at the probe, looking at the ultrasound. And no, it's on the mammogram. Oh, really? Oh, look it. Fast forward. It was a stage 3C breast cancer. There's 4 stages of cancer, as you know. Mine was the last one before it metastasized to other organs, which means it is basically a chronic deadly disease. It had metastasized, and this is what really, it hurt me, it outraged me. I was scared. My cancer metastasized to 13 lymph nodes, a normal mammogram weeks before. What the heck happened?
And what did happen? I mean, we're talking about dense breast tissue. And perhaps at this point, we might want to describe what that is as opposed to, say, fatty tissue.
Right. So when you think about dense breast tissue, and when a physician looks at an X-ray, a mammogram is an X-ray, and looks at a breast that has been X-rayed, if a woman has dense tissue, she has more glandular tissue, which appears white on a mammogram, and so does cancer. So there's no contrast to see the cancer. So you can have fatty breasts, which mammograms are very, very good. 90-something% are found because they can see through that masking, that whiteness.
It's not like a snowflake in a blizzard.
Exactly. And I always, I joke about this, but this is true. I caught the elephant in the examining room. Everybody knew about my dense tissue except the person who had it. And in some respect, if I could have had an elephant in my breast, you still couldn't see it because it was all white. white on white. So year after year, and my breast surgeon finally ended up with 6 doctors, my whole team, said to me, I said to her, well, what happened? And she was the first one in 11 years that said to me, well, Nancy, you have dense tissue. Like I should have known this. But it was almost like a nonchalant manner, like, pass the salt, please. And I'm like, what? No, I have no idea what she's talking about.
And you're somebody who studies things, I know, and you don't take anything lightly, and even the way you go for your testing and the like. And yet, this wasn't something that in the literature that was made available to the average woman that they would have seen, perhaps.
Never. It was never available. In fact, what I did do, when I found out from her that I had dense tissue, and then when I had my other 5 doctor appointments, I asked the same question. First of all, honestly, I thought maybe it was a mistake. I mean, I had 11 years of normal mammograms. When I got my reports that were hidden from me, that the doctors were giving to my referring physician, each of them there was another report that said I had dense tissue. No change from prior exam could hide or obscure cancer. Are you kidding me? And I get this, what I call a happygram, said everything is normal, when it was far from normal. And in fact, what I'm so outraged about, and I know the literature, as you know, read it all the time, that because of my late stage diagnosis and because of the type of cancer I have, I could still die from this disease. And I am pretty darn outraged about it, even though the doctors knew that if you had a mammogram, it is going to miss about 50% of cancers in a dense breast. And the only woman who never knew was the woman who had it, me, the patient.
And we're not talking about a condition here that is really that abnormal or abnormal at all. Because when I'm reading the literature myself now in preparation for this, 40% of women pre-hormonal,
Yes.
is that, what's the term? Have it,
Yes.
have dense.
Yes.
So it's not a small number we're
No, it
talking
isn't.
about.
It's 40 to 50%. And here's what happened. When I found out I had dense tissue, I wrote it down, I put a big question mark, and I was not happy with the responses I was getting from my doctors. When I had I had a single mastectomy, so I still have a good breast. I still am a consumer of mammogram. And in 2004, think about this, I started, because I knew about research, I have a PhD, as you know, so I've studied, I know how to do a little research online. I paid for research to find out about what the heck is dense breast tissue. And what I uncovered stunned me. I found out in 2004, 6 major studies, even the first randomized controlled trial of mammography said that if you have dense tissue, you have a greater chance of having your cancer found by feeling it than by X-ray mammogram. And so when I got all this literature and I accumulated it, I thought, first of all, I found out 40% of women, right? So I said, what about my sister?
Yeah.
What about my colleagues at the State Department? What about my mother? She was still going for mammograms.
And by the way, is there a genetic piece to this?
They're studying that. They say there may be. I don't think it's definitive yet. So again, but my sister is not dense. She actually has fatty breasts. She's older than me. But even when I was diagnosed, which she was actually postmenopausal. And here's what basically they say: premenopausal women, about 3/4 of premenopausal and about 1/4 of postmenopausal have dense breasts. I'm postmenopausal now. I have a good breast. I'm still dense. Hard to figure out.
Well, it's pretty remarkable when you think about it, because you also found later, as you were caught up in all of this tragically, that there had been some major studies already done where you would have imagined the medical community would have rallied around this and said, well, we've got to take this at least one additional step, the ultrasound, because we know that what we're looking at with a mammogram is not telling us what we need to know.
Exactly. Study after study after study for years. Not only that, it's hard for mammogram to see cancer in a dense breast. They call it the masking effect, but also that it is a risk factor independent. Something about the cells out of a dense breast is an independent risk factor for breast cancer.
And the leading one, is it not? I mean,
well, there's always a big debate. Family history, sure, if you have a mutation, of course, that's the leading risk factor of mutation.
Okay.
Family history is a big one. But I would say it's certainly a moderate, at least, risk factor for breast cancer. And so what do I do with this information? Now, this is how dense I was. So I had 3 weeks off from work at the State Department. I did the search. I found out everything I was reading. I was highlighting. I was going from study to study. I was getting madder and madder and madder. And then I thought, silly of me, maybe my doctors really don't know. I mean, it could happen. You have to know everything, do you? And so I put together packets, I think they were pink at the time, of all the literature that I read. And I went to all my 6 doctors and I gave them each a packet and said, look what I uncovered. Do you realize that every day in your offices you're going to be get women just like me, and they're going to go year after year after year like me with late-stage cancer that could kill you? Less than 49% at the time of my diagnosis, stage 3C, survived 5 years. And here was the response from my 6 doctors separately. Oh, no, Nancy, we can't start telling women. We can't. That's not the standard protocol. Well, I said, well, make it. Can't you make it in the greater Woodbury area? I didn't care about Japan or Paris or Rome where I recently spoke. I wanted women in my community to know this information. And my doctors gave me a big fat F. Forget it on my homework assignment.
But why? Because there'll be too many false positives, because it's just burdensome, because we have to do all this additional testing. We can't get the insurance companies to pay for it. I mean, why would they be so blithe about this and so reluctant to acknowledge what the significance of this condition is?
Well, the first response was, oh, we need another more studies. Of course, more studies.
But didn't you show them?
Yes. How many studies do you need? And Larry, it's 14 years later. Have we moved the needle a little bit? Yeah. Have we accelerated where we're going past the speed limit and flying through? Absolutely not.
Well, some might say, well, what about the technology? I mean, here we are 14 years later. Would a mammogram, a 3D mammogram, will that do the trick? Or still do you need either the ultrasound or the MRI or what other palpable things one might do in an exam? Right. Where are we today?
Okay. So the invention of the 3D mammogram, which has been out about 4 or 5 years now, and there's accumulated research, and what it does show, so again, I believe in the science. Like, I'm not making this stuff up. It's not like poor Nancy. No, it's about poor 40% of women. That's what it's about. And so when you look at the science about 3D technology, I would say I get 3D on my quote-unquote good breast. It's a better mammogram for this one purpose specifically or especially, is that it reduces callbacks because it's 3-dimensional. You can manipulate the picture. You can see, it's not really should be called back, because no one likes to be called back. So that reduces the cost too. However, when you look at its yield, it's better in general in all breast tissue. In dense tissue, you find about 1.3 cancers per 1,000 more with the 3D. It's certainly not as, the research doesn't show that it has a better yield than an ultrasound, although a lot of the complaints about ultrasound, it's operator dependent, although we have automated now that's been on the market. There's a lot of things on the market.
Well, I was reading where mammograms and the testing centers are really certified and there's a certain protocol, whereas with ultrasound, maybe not so intense in terms of the training and the like.
True. Probably 12 years ago, I told my colleagues in Connecticut and we can talk about how we finally passed our legislation, there's no standard of how to do ultrasound screening. Well, let's work on one. I'll help you. Could somebody? I will. I'll work. What do you want? Come on. Here's my number.
Well, did you find that surprising?
No. No one even ever called me and said that they wanted me to help them get a standard of ultrasound screening. There isn't one really, even now to this day. Yeah.
So what does that mean?
Well, you said like there's standards for mammogram, radiation, the amount. We have the MQSA, which is the federal regulation started in 1992 about regulating mammograms. Ultrasound has been a phenomenal tool diagnostically. If you have like what I had a ridge, they just took the wand, they threw it on the ridge, they didn't look anywhere else. There's been a challenge because no one was studying this or doing it. How do you do screening ultrasound? How do you find something that you don't expect to be there by handheld, operator dependent? But there's more technology now that's available that is called automated breast ultrasound too. So here's the bottom line. I always say the reason a woman is participating, it's really about consumer protection in a way. I'm buying this mammogram. It's not free. Somebody's paying for it. You know that. Our taxes are paying for it. It's not like, it's free. Doesn't everybody get a free? No, we're paying for it. I buy this equipment in the unlikely event of cancer, it's found early to prevent advanced disease. Because we know that if you have advanced disease, the randomized controlled trial of mammography showed that those trials that reduced advanced disease reduced mortality. If you didn't reduce mortality. So I'm always about early detection, not just for the mere fact of early detection, to reduce those advanced chronic relapsing diseases of cancer.
We're talking to Dr. Nancy Cappello. Are You Dense? Exposing the Best Kept Secret. And speaking of secrets, Nancy, you say in your materials for Are You Dense that women with dense breast tissue have double jeopardy. Explain what you mean by that.
So not only is you go for a mammogram, you don't realize, you're thinking, oh, I'm just going in case I have cancer, it's going to be seen. If you have dense breast tissue, you have a greater likelihood of missed, delayed, hence late stage disease. You also have a greater likelihood of having it be a risk factor, a greater likelihood than the average risk woman of getting breast cancer. So there's this, there's been a lot of work on what's called interval cancer, studies on interval cancer. In other words, I go for my mammogram, it's normal. I come back a year later. Between that year, if you have dense breast tissue, you have a 17 times greater likelihood of having a cancer found by palpation between that mammogram and your next one, because it's missing it. It has to get big enough to be felt. And sadly, if it's big enough to be felt, bye-bye early detection for the most part.
What about self-exam? I mean, what is the process that you recommend, or that is now the protocol today, whether you have dense breast tissue or not, and maybe the difference between those who might believe they have it or need to know whether they have it?
Yeah. Well, the American Cancer Society about 3 or 4 years ago came out with saying that as far as self-breast exams for women to do it, that it really doesn't prove much. I always say to women, and I'm the same way, be breast aware. Like, do you have to go in the shower and do the around the clock at certain times of the month? I don't know about that, but I think a woman needs to know about her own breasts. Some of us have I always had lumpy, bumpy breasts. And again, I don't know why, I just did. So it was hard for me to even see this, like this ridge that my doctor felt 14 years ago. I had a hard time even feeling it, but she felt it. She knew what she was looking for. I think a clinical breast exam by somebody who really knows what they're doing, I think that's really beneficial because, of course, in my case, that's how it was found. But I'm not sure where the powers to be, they're all the smart Alex come out on that.
Well, I'm thinking about that in the context of being a male and prostate exams and digital and the like. And so, the field touch versus a lot of the technology. Where do you place your trust, or is it in a combination of those things?
Well, I place my trust in knowing the facts, in the real news, not the fake news. And sadly, and that's why I started this work, many times the only time women really understand this and know about it is when they come upon like my site and find out about dense tissue in the research and the facts. You're your own best advocate. And if you, and again, I'm not a hypochondriac. I know that in my good breast, my radiologist who's been following, who's given me the ultrasound for the last 14 years on my good breast, I always supplement my mammogram with an ultrasound, and then I have an MRI because I'm at high risk of having this disease recur. And so we were following this little cyst, so he showed me what it looked like. I wasn't worried about it. Like, I didn't say, oh no, get it out, I'm scared. No, I trusted him because he's really a great doctor. And so I think it's important for women to be their own breast advocate, and know the facts. And again, don't get all crazy about it. We all have breasts. A lot of women have dense tissue. The majority of women are not going to end up with breast cancer. But if you do, don't you want the opportunity to find it early?
When you hear all of the rumbling of these elephants fighting each other at the top of the American Medical Association food chain about mammograms themselves, let alone the extra detection that's needed as it relates to dense breast tissue, I mean, where does Are You Dense put itself in that conversation?
Well, I always think I go back to the literature and go back to what's important as far as early detection. Now, should a woman get a mammogram is it 40? Is it 45? Who knows what the magic age is? Although I think it's critically important to know your own risks. So if you had a family history, you do have a greater likelihood of having breast cancer. Certainly, if you had a mutation or your family had a mutation, you really certainly need to have diligent either screening or possibility of prophylactic mastectomy. It's also important to know what you can tolerate too. Now, in my case, I really believe that early detection is important. And I believe that I know that mammogram is not enough. And now some doctors will say to me, well, we can't just say everybody gets an ultrasound. Why not? Everybody gets a mammogram. Can't you do mammogram 1 year, ultrasound the next, mammogram? I don't know. Isn't there another way of looking at it? I mean, it's very lockstep, kind of gang mentality. Everybody is like together in this. Although I will say we have some great supporters over the years. Larry, I've been blessed with folks who kind of really get it,
Well, I'll tell you, when you read the literature, you read a lot of the accounts, it's remarkable, folks, what Dr. Nancy Cappello did out of the jaws of tragedy and trying to make this a case for all women across the country, and almost a lone voice in many ways. I mean, are there many more adherents today? Are you still running up against a lot of resistance?
Yeah, we do run up against a lot of resistance. So When I gave my 6 doctors, brilliant, beautiful, sheepskin, best of the colleges, universities, my analysis of the research, and they said, oh no, we know this already. Oh wow, thanks. I went home. Now again, my husband Joe, and Joe, who's a phenomenal guy, phenomenal husband. Any disease is a family disease. He was devastated, and he was even more devastated that I was getting no. We're not going to change. And so Joe said to me, I think we need to do the legislative route. That was his idea. And I thought, geez, that sounds pretty good. Yeah, let's do that. So he contacted our local Senator Joan Hartley, gave her all the science. Again, it was always about the science. And through Joan Hartley and other
here in
Connecticut, yes, and this is in 2000. We started in 2004 when I was diagnosed. It took us 5 years to finally, after having the radiologists testify against our legislation, kind of making up their own research, honestly, and ended up finally in 2009, after a lot of drama, it was like worldwide wrestling in Hartford, we finally got the first law in the nation to report dense tissue to the patient through the mammography report. Now, I thought, beautiful. It was 5 years later. I almost felt, Larry, that I was no longer a patient. I was getting to be like a survivor almost, because I had years of treatment. I'm still on hormone therapy. And I thought, I think I feel like almost a survivor. I don't want to do this anymore. This is just exhausting. I was working at the State Department, traveling to Hartford, round trip. It was crazy. We passed this law. Now, in the meantime, because we had a defeat the year before, we had a website, we had a 501c3 status. That landmark legislation in Connecticut, and now having more social media. When I started in 2004, there were no hashtags, I'm going to tell you. No Facebook, Twitter, the whole bit. Well, what has social media done? It would break down barriers, as you know. And because of our landmark legislation, I started hearing from women all across this nation who had the same, they would Google dense breast tissue and find me, read my story and say, like Henda from Texas, that's my story, Nancy. I'm doing what you did in Texas. I'm like, oh, God help you, lady. Okay, I'll try to mentor you, but boy, this is not going to be easy. And we actually passed Texas, the second one in 2011.
I want to talk about your successes legislatively across the country, but I want to ask you about something that you pointed to in materials I read about a large study from the Netherlands that confirms that finding breast cancer early still matters, even in light of recent advances in treatment. I was a little surprised. I mean, in other words, do people feel there's a Hail Mary, we got it, it doesn't matter when we find it? I was a little taken aback by that.
Yeah, there's a huge debate, and you mentioned this earlier, about are we overdiagnosing, just like prostate cancer too, are we overdiagnosing breast cancer? Are we finding cancers that are so small that it would never matter, they would never amount to anything? Well, it depends if it's your cancer or not. I mean, if it's your doctor's cancer, maybe you'll say, I don't care if your cancer is, I would just leave it alone. Well, if it's your cancer, you may have a different conclusion of what you want to do, but there's a huge debate. And until we know exactly which cancers are going to grow to the point where they're going to grow outside of the breast and end up being metastasized and could kill, that's when we really need to know which to treat and which not to treat. this study, what really bothered me the most about this, because even in light of treatment, so you'll find out that a lot of oncologists will say to the radiologist, maybe breast screening doesn't really matter anymore. Maybe we're being so good in our oncology findings that through oncology, chemotherapy, and radiation, we could actually zap it out. And do we really need screening? So that's kind of the debate within the, medical community.
What do you think about that debate?
Well, I don't want to be the guinea pig. I mean, you could be the guinea pig. Okay, doctor, go ahead. We'll watch your cancer.
Yeah, let's wait. Wait and watch.
Let's wait and watch.
Now, going back several years, there was an article in the New York Times about you and this dense breast issue overall with the headline, New Laws Add a Divisive Component to Breast Screening. Now, the first paragraph suggests that your efforts irked medical groups while delighting patient advocates. What's the controversy?
Oh, Larry, I know. I think I need a glass of wine to talk about the controversy. It's so crazy. I'm still irking. Honestly, I love irking the medical community because I call it, when I was diagnosed and I found all that literature, it's hard to explain. And I know your listeners who have been through disease and tragedy get it. When you are hit with a ton of bricks and did the right thing, did everything you were told to do, and really think you are going, I'm going to die from this. And no one that is supposed to be brilliant, I call it health care less, could care less about me. And so when Joe ended up going to Joan and we passed our first law, what really is comforting is when I'm able to still use my voice, Larry, and change it for others, because not everybody has this opportunity. I've been very fortunate. I've had a great career. I'm bold. My husband's with me. I'm able to do this. I feel in some respect that I'm supposed to do it right now. But let me tell you something. I need to rescue a dog, take golf lessons, be the pickleball champion in my community. I mean, I'm sunsetting a little bit. I'm a senior. Maybe I don't sound like one, but I am. But it's tiring, although there is some hope, and I want to talk about the hope.
Okay, but you've passed legislation.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, let's start in Connecticut, 2009. Where has it gone since? And what generally does this legislation require?
So once we had the social media and we passed Texas, the second law, and the third, in 2012, we had another 4 states. So we've been going gangbusters. And again, I don't ever say I'm looking for somebody in. Women find me. In our, we have 35 state laws right now. A decade ago, we had
how
0.
remarkable is that? I mean, you say it casually.
I know, it is
But I mean,
crazy.
when you think about it, it was hard getting it through your own state legislature.
well.
I mean, is this pretty remarkable?
Well, I think it is. You think about, and here's why it's remarkable, because it's the truth. If this was, because I've testified at hearings across the states, and I've had legislators, usually legislators get it when you give them the science. I've had opposition parties, it doesn't matter whether Republican or Democrat, say, even when you have we have 35 state laws, we still, in California, we had a bill that became law finally after the first veto by the governor of California, and it included a sunset because we had too many opposers to the bill, and the sunset is now going to be sunsetted, which means it's over.
So you have to go back again?
Yes, so we went back this year to fight it all over again. The sunset is January 2019. And even this year, we did get a senator to introduce it with no sunset. Passed the Senate. It went to the Assembly. When it got to the Assembly, the California Medical Association nixed against it. The Academy of Family Physicians. This is 2018. 35 state laws and more research nixed it. And so did the gynecologists and obstetricians. And so they put another sunset in. So we have a 6-year sunset.
Well, what about the implication that the medical community says that this is going to panic women, lead to an avalanche of needless screening tests and biopsies? I mean, that's what they're throwing at you at times.
And females are saying this. Female doctors are saying this. My friends say, oh, must be men saying this. No, it's females. It's a big, it's a gang mentality. Female or male, we're in this together, baby. That is so offensive. I just read that. I was actually, Consumer Reports did a little online thing about me, and somebody said, well, the opposition is there, it's going to scare and frighten women. Can you imagine saying that about prostate cancer? We're going to scare and frighten men. I mean, is that really ridiculous? And can I tell you something, Larry? 14 years since my diagnosis. I have a loud voice. I've worked all over the world. Am I scared of dying from this disease? You better damn believe it. Yeah, you better believe it.
And when we look at it, I mean, well-informed patients are, I would imagine now, because of your efforts, even though we're talking primarily about laws that require reporting, that they are going to their doctors now, I would imagine, in large numbers and saying, hey, look at this. I want more testing. I mean, what are you hearing from patients and real
Well,
women?
this is phenomenal. So I just mentioned California. So I knew that unless we had some data about California, we're going up. I mean, that state is huge. It's like half.
Well,
you
they
know.
may be dividing it
Yeah.
in three, so we'll see
I
what happens. So
heard
you're going to
that.
have to deal with
I
three
know.
legislatures.
Imagine that. So I said we need to hear from the voices that matter. And who are the voices that matter? Women who get mammograms in California. So we went out, paid. I did. Are You Dense and Are You Dense Advocacy. That's why we raised money. We paid for a study. We wanted research. We did a study in California, representative race ethnicity. It was a beautifully designed interactive study online. We interviewed 500 women who've had mammograms within the last 2 years, and we asked them. We asked them a lot of questions about: are you talking to your doctors? Are they asking for more testing? What about sunsetting this law? And 95% of women, and I had this whole report that we did, we submitted it to the legislature. It's hard to refuse the voices that are participating in mammogram screening. So 95% of women said they do not want the law to sunset. 74% of women, now before the law there was nobody that knew this, knew that breast tissue makes it more difficult for mammograms to see cancer. And half of the women knew that it was a risk factor also. So we know
So
we're
the
doing
education
something.
really is taking hold.
Right, exactly. And so I think because of our survey that we submitted to the legislature, hopefully the 6-year sunset will pass both chambers and we'll still have a law in California.
Why don't we have federal legislation?
Well, that's exactly what I said when I was diagnosed. So I studied the federal MQSA, the Mammography Quality Standards Act, in 2011. You ready for this? I think I like getting beat up because this is crazy when you think about it. I mean, the more you push me back, the more I go forward. It's really remarkable. 2011, we were able to go to the FDA that regulates the Mammography Quality Standards Act to ask the FDA to, in the Mammography Quality Standard Act, federal standard, put in a woman's dense tissue in another 2 sentences about what does that mean. So at the end of the day, a lot of drama. We had other patient advocates. We had some doctors supporting us. We had some that were not. At the end of the day, in 2011, now do the math. How many years was that? 7 years ago. The FDA MQSA committee came to consensus after drama. Oh, I don't know. We're going to scare. Came to consensus. We only had 2 laws at the time, Connecticut and Texas, that they were going to then change the regulations 7 years ago. Ask me what has happened since then.
Nothing.
Nothing. Now, here's the hope. 2016, I see something that comes across my desk. The FDA has taken up the issue of dense tissue again. I'm like, is this like deja vu all over again? This would be Groundhog's Day. What's going on? I cart my butt down to the FDA, testify in front of them. Everybody's all nice to them. Oh, we're happy to be here. I'm like, I am damn mad I'm here. And I'll tell you why. At the time, 5 years ago, you said you were going to do something. We're saying the same thing. I think I'm like in an alternate universe. Well, this year, Commissioner Gottlieb, and we were able through our federal partners, because I've been paying lobbyists in Washington on our advocacy side to represent Are You Dense Advocacy on our federal legislation too. We finally have gotten a commitment. I don't know what that means. You know, they said August. Now that's like hello, next month. Count the days. 2018 to start proposing regulations so that the standard would be for everybody. Now, I don't know if I believe it, because again, in 2011, I was ready to take golf lessons, figuring good, it's going to take 6 months. They can't put together 4 sentences. I couldn't believe it. I mean, I'm still outraged about it, but I'm encouraged because Gottlieb wrote it in his blog. It's in writing, plus our federal partners. So we have a federal bill that we introduced back in 2011-12. We finally got bipartisan support. We have a Republican Democrat on both the House and the Senate. I was just talking to Senator Feinstein, who is our leader in the Senate, along with the Nevada senator, Dean Heller. And they're writing to the FDA to say, get off your butts and let's get this done.
So we may see something happening on the federal level.
I hope so.
I do want to ask you, Dr. David Katz has been a real advocate of yours from Yale University. He wrote that many of his colleagues are mistaken in this debate because they conflate the absence of evidence for evidence of absence.
I know, he's great. He's brilliant.
Does that really sum it up and explain what that means to you?
Well, I think that when you're a physician and you're into, evidence, medical, you're waiting really for the next perfect study. We want the perfect study. If that was the case, we wouldn't do anything. And I know you have to have standards. I know you can't be just doing things willy-nilly. David Katz, let me just tell you this story. I was in Japan in 2015. I was invited to Tokyo, Japan. Larry, I'm in my spare bedroom still doing this work in Woodbury, Connecticut, to speak at their international conference. The best people in the world, all the MDs and me, PhD, thank goodness, at least I had something, to go to Tokyo and to speak at this conference. I was shocked that I had across the pond and a few others. People were nice to me. The Japanese get it because Asian women are more dense than Western women. And they kind of get the fact that mammograms are limited. So when I was in Japan, I'm like thinking, wow, this is great. They like me. They really, really like me. I get home. I fly into JFK. I land and I read this article. It was in JAMA saying that Nancy Cappello this is in U.S., is making us do all these unnecessary blah, blah, blah. And that's when Depp sparred David, Dr. Katz, who's just well known all over the world, to write his little piece. And I was just so joyful because he's so brilliant. He's just a wonderful man for him to do that. And again, they're always looking for the evidence. Well, listen, we know that when you reduce advanced disease, you reduce mortality. We know ultrasound is going to find it earlier. We know MRI is going to find the most cancers. Let's just do it. We've had this equipment around for years.
Well, I love it. I don't know if it was written in your materials or where I might have read it, but they say breast cancer testing is the process of looking for trouble. So let's use whatever's at our disposal to find it.
Yes.
That makes such
that's
common
David.
sense.
Yes,
it
looking
really
for
does.
trouble, exactly.
Well, are you dense? Dr. Nancy Cappello, we know that you're brilliant and have really gained in such an appreciation for both the politics and the medicine and the science as it relates to dense breast tissue. I can't thank you enough for being part of America Trends. If people want to get more information, how can they do it?
Sure. Well, you can certainly go to our website, rudense.org. From there, you'll see Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Are You Dense Advocacy. We have a great state map because you need to know where you are in the system. Where's your state? Is your state protecting you? But I will say to women and those who love women out there about breast screening, even if you're in a state without a law or with a law, just because you have a law, I mean, I'm not dense. I mean, I am dense, but I'm not stupid as far as not everybody's going to talk to you about it, what it means. It's not just good enough to know that you're dense, but if you don't know the impact. So it's important to be your best advocate. Just be armed a little bit. We have a great brochure that it's been translated in 5 or 6 languages called Are You Dense? We also have a breast screening guide, which goes through all the screening technologies. What's the yield going to be? What's the harm? What's the benefit? What the consideration? They're using that in Woodbury when they talk to their breast screening patients, which I think is wonderful. So all that information, just be armed with knowledge and work with your docs. If you have a choice of doctors and you look for somebody that might know how to do ultrasound screening. The best resource you can use is go to your local cancer center, find your local support group, even if you're not a breast cancer survivor, and ask those ladies who are the right docs to go to, man. They know it.
A one-woman crusade, and it has resulted in some tremendous action here in America, and it only goes to prove. What would you say to somebody who's listening who may have a cause that they are passionate about, maybe something they've been affected by personally, and they're a little reluctant to step forward the way you have?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to tell you something. The day-to-day is actually miserable, doing it every day, but the end product, when I hear from women across this country who say to me, Nancy, I was in the doctor's office in Minnesota and some lady said, there's a lady in Connecticut, Nancy Cappello. We were really mad at her a long time ago, but we like her now because it's really true. We're finding more cancers. So I know right now it is, to be able to use your voice. I'm still alive. I mean, Larry, I've lost many friends from this disease. It's a hideous disease. It's a dream killer, a life stealer. I'm still alive, and I know right now at this time I'm here to use my voice, and I'll tell anybody else, that's a motivator. When you've had something tragic in your life, don't give up. Use your voice to take an injustice and make it justice. That's what makes this world such a great country. That's what makes the United States what it is. It's democracy, it's justice, it's for every woman. And again, what we want every woman to know the answer. Are you dense? And if you are, advocate for other screening tools beyond the mammogram.
Nancy Cappello, thank you for
Thank
being
you,
part
Larry,
of
so
America
much.
Trends. And thank you for listening. And if you want more information, again, you can go to rudense.org.